Good morning, church. My name is Danny Daly, and it is just a pleasure to be worshiping with you this morning. Today we have something really special in store. We have been going through our Start Close In sermon series, and there have been a lot of amazing conversations that have come out of it. And so today we get to celebrate. We're going to hear some testimonies. We're going to hear from Becca and Corey and Josh, and they're actually going to remind us of some of the things that we've really learned and thought about as a church in the past couple weeks. So if you're a note taker, I just want to reassure you that some of these things you might have seen before, but if you feel like you have a hard time writing it all down, I am putting a PDF of all of today's sermon notes right on our website. So I want you to just enjoy the conversation, and if you are wanting to make sure you get all of the statements, then not only can you go back to previous weeks' sermons, but you're just going to have a really great cheat sheet right on our website this week. I got your back. But then number 2, church, I'm really excited for next week too, because Corey's going to be sharing a vision about what it looks like to be restarting our in-person Sunday services. So if that's something that gets you really excited, I just want to give you a heads up that you're going to want to tune in to what's happening next Sunday. But next, we actually get to proceed to an amazing time of worship. And so I don't know what today holds for you, but I would just love to pray over you as we get to gather together across time and space to remember the goodness of our God. So, Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you for this time that we have, no matter what today holds. I just pray that you will help to quiet our spirit to just be present with ourselves and remember that you are present here with us. Help us to just put away distractions, whatever that looks like in life right now, and remind us about who you really are, the beauty of your love, your goodness, your faithfulness, the way that you accept us just as we are. God, these are reasons that we get to just worship you and declare how awesome you are. And so thank you for this time. May it recenter us and prepare us to hear these good things that are happening in the life of our church. In your name I pray. Amen.
With this heart open wide, from the depths, from the heights, I will bring a sacrifice. With these hands lifted high, hear my song, hear my cry. I will bring the sacrifice. I will bring the sacrifice. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay me down, lay me down. Letting go of my pride, giving up all my rights. Take this life and let it shine, shine, shine. Take this life and let it shine. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. Always. It'll be my joy. It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. It'll be my joy to say your will and your way. Always. I lay me down, I'm not my own. I belong to you alone. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, hand on my heart, this much is true. There's no life apart from you. Lay me down, lay me down. Oh, lay me down, lay me down. Oh, lay me down, lay me
You have come to save us. You have come to save us. You have come to save us, Lord. You have made a way here. You have made the way clear. You have come to save us, Lord. You have come to save us, Lord. 'Cause Jesus, you're the one who saves us. You're the one who saves us. King of all the other kings on earth. Jesus, you're the one who saves us. You're the one who saves us. King of all the other kings on earth. You are light and fire. You are our desire. You have come to save us, Lord. You're the hope among us. You're the peace that binds us. You have come to save us, Lord. Yeah, you have come to save us, Lord. Jesus, you're the one who saves us. You're the one who saves us. King of all the other kings on earth. Jesus, you're the one who saves us. You're the one who saves us. King of all the other kings on earth. King of our kings and Lord of our lords, the light of the world you shine. King of our kings and Lord of our lords.
Hello, everyone. Well, this week you are in for a real treat because you have 3 of the teaching pastors on the stage this week. Myself, Becca Riddle, this is Corey Spangler, and Josh Fisher. You get 3 teaching pastors for the price of 1, so you came on a bargain Sunday to watch the sermon. But this week we wanted to invite you into a conversation that we wanted you to bear witness to. We're basically talking about this last sermon series, Start Close In. And we not only wanted to highlight some of the things that really popped for us during the sermon series and slow down and take a breath, but we also gathered the stories that you sent in, the testimonies of how this sermon series touched and affected your life. And so we wanted to showcase those in a way so that you could do some celebrating with us. So I wanted to start with Corey. Corey, tell us a little bit about what inspired this sermon series for you.
Yeah, by the way, we're going to banter today, and hope, the way I think of sermons and preaching also, church, is it's a conversation that should make the rest of your week better. And so today you'll get to hear from the 3 of us. Hopefully this and the summaries, the testimony, it'll fill your heart like it's filling ours. I'll start by just saying this, though, which is this title, when I first shared it with the preaching team, you guys what was your reaction?
Oh, it was a thumbs down for me. I was like, I don't, just not compute words in the wrong order.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was definitely something I was struggling to connect with,
Yeah.
That's an awkward phrase.
It's an awkward phrase. That's exactly it. But before I tell you how I got to the phrase, it's based on a poem. If you've been listening, it's a great poem actually by a Northwest poet. But the reason behind how we got to this sermon series, it goes back to me pacing in my office on Christmas Eve. And we'd gone into the Christmas season, had a lot of great success. We'd adapted to the regulations as a church. And on the eve of Christmas Eve, I received word that one of our staff members was a positive COVID case. And so on Christmas Eve, most of the people are out of the church, and I'm doing this investigation. I'm calling people. I'm going to the health place, trying to figure out who's been affected by this. And it was just this intense thing where all of Christmas Eve, probably 6 hours, I'm just sweating bullets. And I'm literally pacing and praying and chanting and thinking to God, I'm like, God, I don't want to call the 50 people that might have been affected and tell them, Merry Christmas, you might have COVID. Well, that 6-hour investigation basically revealed that really there was only 2 people that I needed to call. Our protocol had worked, this kind of stuff had worked, but man, I was just sweating bullets. And as we got into the new year, I just had this sense of, man, COVID got really close to home for us. We had a couple of staff member cases, despite all the precautions in December. We had a couple of deaths in the church and some associated with the church in December. And so while the cases were ramping up locally, we were experiencing it also. And so as we got into the new year, even though some of the restrictions had changed, we realized we needed to go slower. And so I was like, well, how do we get excited about going slower and not getting back to in-person services? And that's where I feel like God led me to this poem that I'd heard a while ago that I felt like was just super applicable. And the heart of it all was, hey, you know what? We have an opportunity right now where we can get upset that we're not meeting in person together, or we can go, the church has always been a mobile enterprise. How do we get good at doing it right now this way? How do we get good so that the parent that has to stay home with their kids because they're sick can still feel like they're really engaging with church content? And that led to this. So let's look at the series. And I think, Josh, are you going to start us off? Jumping all the way back
so
to
we're going to take
lesson?
just a little brief, like you were saying, Corey, we're just going to briefly outline each week and talk a little bit about how it impacted our lives, but then also we want to share how it impacted your life too, because I think it's really powerful. So this first week is a week where Corey introduced really the whole series. And one of my favorite things about this message is I came away thinking, boy, this is a message that I would recommend to people who are checking Court Street out, as to think, well, what is Court Street all about? Well, really, you were talking about some of the key heart type things I would say are part of our church. And I loved the idea of fuel. And we talked about these motivation, these fuel that motivate us in our lives. And you talked about this invitation of Jesus to invite us to peace over pressure and respect over fear and love over anger. And really, we've come through this long year and we're still continuing it really in many ways, where we feel definitely all of the second things there, pressure, fear, and anger. But yet the story that we explored from John chapter 8, really Jesus' invitation was to choose something else. than those.
Absolutely. And honestly, this story really came to life for me when I thought about that fuel source that Jesus was using, because here he was in this situation where he was honestly being tested by people who were surrounding, watching this. They drug this woman out and they were ready to just punish her. They wanted to see how Jesus responded. I can imagine she felt fear. There was fear happening. There was pressure, and yet he leaned into something when he could have felt the pressure to bow to the religious group. He could have felt pressure to bow to the law-abiding citizens. What is he going to do? What's Jesus going to do? And they're using this woman as a pawn. And I just love that he leaned in close to her. He got very personal with her, and the beauty of the whole thing is he gave her dignity. He lifted her head and said, "You're not going to be a pawn in their games, and I'm not either." And it was just this beautiful interaction of how he used that love as fuel. He used that instead of going to pressure, he used respect. He used peace. He did everything right, and it was a surprise. And it still is a surprise to read today. So it was a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that moment where Jesus just says to everyone, he says, "Oh, you that are without sin can start the condemnation. You can throw the first stone, literally." And everybody gets quiet and walks away. It's just one of those moments that to think about living in it with Jesus, it's beautiful. Right out of the gate, as I started digesting this with you guys on the teaching team and then sharing it with the rest of the staff, and once I preached this first message, I realized that the way that the poem and the way that the character of Jesus that he started close in, it really had a powerful effect on people. One of the people that I shared the poem with is a friend of mine who's going through a cancer journey, and I was just talking and sharing what we were doing, and I read the poem, and I didn't realize it at the time, but she had just gotten some difficult news, and it was like the world was stacking up all of these things for her of like, this test might imply this, and then it has this effect, and I have to have this conversation with my family, and what does this mean for the future? And she was getting these like 5 and 10 steps out. And if you've ever been facing a diagnosis like that, it's absolutely overwhelming. Right. And I remember I read the poem to her, and just the first word, she'd been struggling with this before God and the whole mess, and just that word, start close in, start with the first thing, close in, she just started to weep. And it just meant the world to her. I can trust God with this. I've just got to meet God close in and walk with him one step at a time. Another testimony that came to me that was really powerful was from our own Daniel Daly. He's sometimes the worship leader here. He's the guy that played the accordion a few weeks back. He's just awesome. And he's also married to our own Danny Daly. And this guy right here, I just love this guy. I respect the way he thinks. This guy, he just has a great heart. He had a really positive reaction to that first sermon, especially that idea of love over anger. And so he wrote me this. I got his permission to read it. He just said, "Corey, thanks for reaching out about my reaction to the Start Close In series." He says, "I remember being struck by the guidance to move toward love instead of anger. Specifically, I was struck by the line that anger's useful, but it's not an emotion to live from as love is. Before," he says, "I think I was experiencing some confusion about anger. It's an uncomfortable emotion, but it's also one that Jesus demonstrated. Without realizing it, I was trying to create a dualistic formation of anger. Either it's good or bad." And he concludes by saying, "The notion that you presented me offers a way out. Anger is useful. It's sometimes necessary, and it's a part of ourselves that we can accept, but it's not an emotion to live our daily lives from. It won't keep giving and sustaining like love does." That was freeing for me. Preach it, brother.
Wow.
Right?
We'll
You're
give him the
hired.
mic
Sign
next
him
week.
up.
For sure.
Accordion and preacher.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a great combination. One man band
Something like
I
that.
don't know. He could do it all. He could do it all. All right. Well, that leads us into week 2. And one of the things I wanted to highlight when we're looking at week 2 is we were really looking at. We highlighted the story from Jesus, one of my favorite Bible stories. You can find it in John 4, where Jesus is having an interaction with the woman at the well. And the thing that's interesting is that this encounter shouldn't have happened. There were too many things set up in place that Jesus, as a man, and this woman, their genders should have kept them separate. Their ethnicity should have kept them. Jesus was a Jew. She was a Samaritan. They were supposed to hate each other. All of these barriers, and Jesus interrupted those unhealthy cycles that were happening in his culture by meeting with this woman and really cutting to the heart of what she needed to hear. I want to go over the points that we pulled out from this because I think they were so valuable for us to just look at what we learned from this story. That by starting close in, Jesus invites us to move from rules to relationship, from comfort zone to connection, to this maybe someday things will be different, to just embracing the right now and taking a first step. And I want to look at this picture of Jesus and just know that for me, when I was looking at the story, the thing and the point that really came alive to me in a new way was that Jesus moved from the comfort zone into a deeper way of relating to this woman, because they could have just had those niceties that we all have. Those, how's the weather? How are things? I'm thirsty. Oh, how's the water today? The water's great. Just these really
What's
pleasantries.
wrong with Josh? Yeah.
Right, the things that we talk about. Sorry, Josh. But instead, Jesus moved past that and he cut right to the heart, to a place that was out of his comfort zone perhaps, but to a place where he started in close with this woman. He cut to the heart of the matter and he said, we're going to have a conversation that is actually going to change your life. And I loved looking at the story through that lens.
Yeah, the way that these different scriptures, these different snapshots of Jesus really popped in light of the poem and just the intention that we were approaching with, it was just really life-giving. And this idea of moving from being a watcher to a worshiper, it's not just about as we're experiencing things through the internet or on cable TV or however you're getting to us. It really can happen even when you're coming in person. You can be a watcher and not actually go all the way and be a worshiper. And so this was a cool invitation for me. It was exciting, and it was really cool to see Jesus taking someone who wouldn't be classified as a typical worshiper. But he gets her to this spot where she realizes she has this encounter and she's caught up in the awe of Jesus and who he is. And she becomes really an evangelist. She goes and gets everybody, this person who's kind of filled with shame and hiding. She goes and she wants to bring everybody to just come and see this guy that told me everything. And one of the things that I've realized through this is that COVID and the interruption to our lives has given us some gifts. And we now have the gift, and people have been reaching out to us and talking about how it's been a gift to experience church in their living rooms with their loved ones. I don't know about you, but sometimes Allison and I reserved our best fights for Sunday morning on the drive to church. When you got to get the kids up and you got to do all this stuff, and then we're driving in, and somehow it all reaches a dramatic, depths of heck right then. And I don't know why that is, but we haven't had that for a while now. And so there's these obstacles, but there are also opportunities. And it's the opportunity to lead ourselves from being a watcher, a fan of Jesus, to actually being a worshiper and being transformed by him.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the delightful surprises through this whole thing has been when we've heard from people who are connecting with what we're saying that are far away from us. They don't live here in Salem. And there's one story that just happened to me recently. I have a friend from high school. His name is Dave. And Dave contacted me through Facebook. And he told me that they had been connecting with Court Street Services. And I was kind of surprised, as he actually made this comment about how he said, this is like the first church I've seen that somehow can use an accordion in worship and it not be horrible.
Oh, yeah.
And so we had a good chuckle about that. And I just said, well, wow, you've been checking it, you watch regularly? And I'll just read you what he said. It was really Really great. He says, it's a long story, but finding you was kind of a Hail Mary, as we are in a weird place with church in general, COVID included. We started about 6 weeks ago after not finding anything local online that was working for us. We were so burned out with politics and church being bedfellows. Deanna's reaction, that's his wife's name, Deanna, reaction after watching Court Street for the first time was, and I quote this, she says, "Man, I wish we could find a place like that around here." And this is from a family that's located in Bellingham, Washington, and are connecting with the message. And I love Dave's story. You know, he comes from a similar background as me, growing up in kind of a fundamentalist kind of background, and he's been hurt by the church and hurt by some other things in life, and yet he's finding this message that is really, really a cool way that we talk about God and God's love. And that's really what this lady was finding, you know, in our story too.
Yeah, let's jump to week 3 now, and that was a bigger vision for service. This was a cool thing to look at, of starting close in with how we're serving one another and how we're serving God. This was back on February 7th, so we're now, you know, it's just a couple weeks back. And again, we're looking at John 4. So the drama and the transformative moment of Jesus with the woman at the well. She's run off when she's going to tell people to come back and come meet this guy. And the disciples are standing there, and they know all those cultural taboos that you've been talking about. And so we get to then look at the story, and we got to climb into what was the disciples' perspective, and what was Jesus doing with them. And really, as a rabbi, as a leader, and as somebody who's forming a new movement, what would ultimately become the church, what he's doing is he's interrupting their ways of thinking. That was a key word for this sermon, and we need interruptions to our ways of thinking. You see, the truth of it was the way that the disciples were thinking of God. They were you know, mostly good little, you know, God-following guys. But the way they were thinking about God and others was actually limiting their love of God and others. And so Jesus is interrupting that. He's reprogramming that. He's showing them a different thing, from the way he talks to somebody as he's getting a drink of water to the miracles that he's performing. And one of the things that was a delight in this sermon was to get to talk about my friend from the church, June Gessner. Here's a picture of her and her daughter, Rhonda. And we talked about how one of the ways that they've found to serve that's just a kick is Rhonda paints rocks, and both of them hide them different places. And June hides them actually around her. It's called an independent living facility. I have to say I made a mistake, and I got called out for it by Rhonda. I called it an assisted living place, and Rhonda explained to me. She said, "Well, it's not assisted; it's independent. Although they do clean her house, they do make her bed, and they make her meals." And I said, "When can I sign up for independent living?"
Seriously,
like Allison
nice.
and I, can we go now? But anyway, sorry about the mistake, June. Love you, love Rhonda. But here's some folks that are just going, I can serve by painting rocks and hiding them. Yeah. What a delight to just realize whatever you're doing can be an act of service.
For sure. You know, another testimony just to that is our own Amy Stoltz, who works here at the church. She was sharing with us and the rest of the staff that during the ice storms, she started to have kind of a guilty feeling because she kept hearing all these great stories of neighbor helping neighbor, and they were coming out with their chainsaws and they're like lifting trees off of cars, and she was just feeling kind of bad that she's a mom to a beautiful 6-month-old baby girl, Harper, and she doesn't have a chainsaw or know how to operate one, and she just was just having that itch to serve and to help. And anyway, the line of the poem came to her, start close in. And she started thinking, what can I do? Like, what do I have available to me right now that I would be able to start serving in? And she thought of, I actually have electricity. A lot of my friends don't. I have hot water and a shower and a washer and a dryer. So she started just calling people that she knew might need those services, opened up her home, shared her hospitality. And it was like, man, that's such a beautiful testimony. And that was exactly kind of what the heartbeat of that message was, is start right now with what you can do and make something beautiful happen. It was great.
Awesome.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of this message was when, Corey, you started out and you said, just imagine for me, like for a moment, how Jesus started his organization or his ministry, this whole religion, really. And you gave a bunch of things. Here's just a few. Like Jesus started by getting a few followers, miracling copious amounts of wine. You remember that party? Start a stampede outside the temple, do some miracles, meet secretly with a religious official. And, as you started talking about all these things, I was thinking, man, I don't know at what point I would stop trusting this leader,
Nobody
Yeah.
did it. He started close in with all those things, and
Yeah,
did.
he
The
sure
church is
did.
still activated today, so he did a good job.
It is, yeah.
And that kind of leads us into week 4 when we were talking about really what it means to communicate with God. That was on Valentine's Day. And this is one of those messages, again, that I felt was just really fantastic as far as a message that really communicates the heart of Court Street. It's one of those that I would really recommend going back and listening to, because we really talked about this idea of abiding with God. And you guys had this great way of talking about prayer. There were these really cool artwork that we used that Danny Daly came up with. And if you remember, there was this way that we try to relate to God. We try to climb the ladder of achievement, and we talked about all these different things where we try to follow rules or please God, or we're afraid of being punished, and so we're trying to reach up there to God. But then there was this opposite way as well. It's called the pit of defeat, where we just don't feel like we're worthy of what God has for us. Maybe we feel burnt out. And definitely this is a story that many people that I've heard that attend Court Street, man, they've gotten burnt out by religion, by church. They think maybe someday, I'll be loved by God. But God invites us to come out of the pit, to come off of the ladder, and to go on this new vision, this new journey, which is walking along with God. And the word you guys used was abiding, and I absolutely love that.
We stole abiding from the scriptures.
We did, yeah, we did. It was actually John chapter 15. It's Jesus's really his last big speech and interaction with his disciples, and it's sometimes called the upper room discourse, and it's just a really tender moment to peek in on, to hear Jesus after he's invested in these guys. He's poured his heart and soul into them. He knows what's coming for them. They're still not quite getting it. And you get to hear these words and all these things that he's telling them that afterwards are going to take on this very vivid meaning for him. And it's very relatable for us as fallible humans, because the whole Last Supper thing starts with Jesus saying, "Hey, I'm not going to get to do this again with you till the coming of the kingdom." And they get into an argument about when the kingdom does come, who's going to be the greatest. And they start jostling for position and doing this stuff. And Jesus invites them to that word, abiding, to abide with him, to really connect with him. And as you and I, we prepared that message, and it was a great message. It's kind of actually the forgotten message, because that's the week when it debuted that the big ice storm hit, and so we actually had like half as many views on YouTube or whatever. I mean, the internet was broken, everything was broken. It was a wild go of it, but. I remember in the preparation for that sermon, I came into the teaching team, I had the poem, and I just said, "Hey guys, I want you to listen to the poem from the perspective of an invitation to prayer, of communicating with God, an invitation to talk with God. And when you read it from that perspective, oh, it's such an invitation. It's so beautiful."
It's very rich.
And everybody just started writing. I'll never forget that I was just like, I probably have to set this up, but I just said it, I read the poem, and everybody just starts going, "Oh my gosh." And so that was also the week too where I got to talk about our friend, a longtime Court Streeter named Jessica Ritter, and we got a picture of her here with her dog. She sadly passed away this last year, but man, her life and her legacy really illustrated that abiding with Christ from so many wonderful angles. One of the things that I told the story of was she's a local chef, owns a couple of local restaurants, and she learned and was trained as a chef by the great Julia Child. And you can go back and hear the story. I won't take the time for all of it right now. But when she studied under Julia's late in her career. She's had all these accomplishments, all these accolades. She's got all this, influence. And she still made the time to abide with her students and to pass on to them a love of cooking, a love of eating, and a love of teaching and being taught and just absorbing that. And that's also how Jessica lived her life. And it's how she lived her life with God, even as she faced the transition from this life to the next, much too early due to cancer. She had this abiding confidence in God that he was going to see her through. He was going to walk her through this most personal of transitions. And she's just an absolutely beautiful person.
We also heard from some of our longtime Court Streeters, Todd and Brenda London, and she sent me a sweet message on just how that message really personally affected them. So I want to just take a minute to read this to you. She says this, as for how the series touched us, it certainly did. When I look at the ladder of achievement and the pit of defeat, I can certainly see how over the years, as we have fallen into one trap or the other, and how competition against each other does not lead to teamwork with each other. I think it's summed up in just this one sentence. Jesus interrupts our small vision of ourselves and has invited us instead to be part of his bigger vision. If we can just take that one sentence deep into our hearts, we will become so much closer and further away from our own pain, anxiety, and depressive feelings. Once again, we got ourselves another preacher. I mean, she just summed it up so beautifully. And what I loved is that they not only heard this message and had good conversation about it, but they actually were able to put it into practical use, because that week the ice storm came. They have this beautiful property, and you can see a picture here that the ice storm took down a lot of beautiful trees and just created a giant mess on their property. And what she went on to tell me is that having this message kind of in their heart of starting close in and how to walk and abide with Jesus, they started to want to just get really depressed and overwhelmed by all of this mess. But instead, they just were reminded that Jesus wants to just walk with us on honest ground. And this was the honest ground that they were walking on. And that she knew, and they had this peace about them, that they were going to do one step at a time, that they didn't have to feel overwhelmed with steps 2, 3, and 4, that they could just start with the first step, a small step, and be with him. And I love that they were able to just put this right into place, right into play.
Yeah, and that takes us to week number 5. That's last week, which was you, Josh. You were preaching, and you talked about connecting with others and starting close in with that. And I loved your treatment of the passage from Matthew chapter 18. Jesus is giving some instructions to his disciples about things. And sometimes the scripture gets taught as Jesus kind of handing people new rules. Mm-hmm. And you can look at it like that, but that's really not how we look at things here. We look at Jesus as the wisdom teacher, the transformative teacher, the person he's bringing us into our truest selves, close in. And you really, I thought, just did a beautiful job with Matthew 18, a passage that sometimes is taught as here's the new rules, and really what it is it's this undoing of a structure of who's right and who's wrong. How do you settle conflicts? And oftentimes we want to grab God and drag him in here and be like, and let's have God tell us who's right and who's wrong. And Jesus changes the whole game in that passage, and he really gets to the heart of conflict is actually an opportunity for connection. It's an opportunity for reconciliation. And one of the key things that you had in that sermon that was just really good for me was the idea of starting close in with the relationships that you already have. And maybe some of you've lived next to your neighbors forever and you haven't really connected with them until COVID. They're the only people that you can really connect with, or whoever lives across the hall from you, or whatever it is. Maybe you've never talked to your coworkers on Zoom as much, or whatever. But start with the people who are around you and start to build there. Sometimes I notice in my own life, I can have barriers to people, and it sneaks in really, really easy. I remember when a mentor of mine said, Corey, roles often get in the way of relationships. And I thought of that during your message, because I can remember times in my life I've put a role or I've put a title on somebody, and what it did is it didn't bring them close in, it kept them separated. One of the most famous ones that I could think of for my life is My buddy Brian, longtime best friend, he and I have been lifelong best friends. We got married within a month of each other. And I remember when I made a switch from thinking of his wife as Brian's wife, where she was, somebody who was a couple things away from me, but somehow she was always in my life and stuff, to being like, no, I'm going to form a friendship with her that's Corey and Sarah. And we're around each other. I'm not just, oh, hi, Brian, and your wife. It's like, you can start with those relationships, and maybe there's some barriers that just by renaming them, all of a sudden you realize God's had somebody in your midst the whole time.
And you're lucky to have Sarah as a friend because she's an amazing cook.
She is an amazing cook.
Yes.
True story.
It's true
They go to
story.
this church. If they ever invite you over, say yes.
Yes. 100 times.
Well, I had a lot of fun with Legos, if you remember for that message. And one of the cool things about Legos is that, there's just different ways of connecting. And as we talked about, the ways that Jesus invites us to connect with each other, just using that as an illustration was a lot of fun. This picture, when I first got it from my friend Eric, who attends here at Court Street, it was kind of awkward because I didn't understand quite what was going on. But this is his television, and he had brought out this Lego creation of the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars that he and his kids had built a while ago. And it was, when I was talking about Legos, it reminded him of that sweet moment, and he brought it out, and he wanted to take a picture of that and send it to me. I invited people to send pictures. Here's another picture that was sent in. This is Autumn, and she was put together this cool creation. It was fun to listen to the kids as they were interacting, and just to have an invitation to say, yeah, get your Legos out, kids. You're going to build stuff while we're having this sermon.
Best sermon ever.
Yeah, and then Daniel and Danny Daly, they love Lego. I don't know, Daniel loves Legos, and he built this this cool creation here. He called it steampunk. So it was kind of.
I'm going to confess to everybody right now, I'm a Lego kid. All right. And
Nice.
This right here, what I'm holding, is my Christmas present from my parents. And I thought I would just, really just let you guys know that I enjoy building with Legos. My parents usually get me a gift card. And this year I
Nice.
was like, what would be more fun to open than a gift card? They're like, just tell us what you want. We'll get it for you. I was like, go get me some Legos. Here it is. I haven't opened it yet, but I'm excited. Your sermon got me more
That's
excited.
awesome.
And so maybe I'll do it this weekend.
That's
But
awesome.
While you're watching this, you'll build
while I'm
another
watching,
one.
yeah, I'll be watching this. Hey, wait, this is kind of, hey, Corey, enjoy your Legos. Like, what just happened? That's kind of weird.
That's awesome. That's so good. We kept getting feedback from people of how this message was affecting them. And I have a good friend, Holly, who attends our church. She's on our worship team. And she just wanted to send a video to me because it was just the easiest way for this busy mom who's working a lot to just communicate her feelings. So let's just take a look at Holly's reaction to our sermon series.
So just the thoughts of that, to start close in, to me, I just think of start out being super vulnerable. That's such a scary place to start. And, with distance, being away from everybody for the last year, obviously has impacted us all so differently. And for me, especially the last 2 or 3 months have just been so hard. There's even more of a facade in relationships because we're forced to do virtual, be behind a screen. We're forced to do more written, which is just not, it's not close. There's just always this barrier between us that is just, it's hard. I'm exhausted. And I just miss connection with all of it. And then we're replaying the word abide, that picture that you guys put up of, the line with the dip, that ditch, and then you and God walking together after that. That's what I feel like I have in so many ways and in so many parts of my life. And then when I just get so depressed or so down just on how hard life is, I just feel that separation because it's I don't have the constant people around me even encouraging me and church family, just physically not around me. And so through this series, though, I feel like it's just been this beautiful reminder, one, that God is there. He is there. He is freaking waiting for us to just say, get your butt over here. Like, I'm here. I've been here the whole time. Get your butt over here and just fall into me. So that has been awesome, as just this reminder. I don't know if any of this makes sense. I don't know if I've put one actual thought together. So I'm sorry, my friend. But I think I'll leave you with that. I don't know. Feel free to say, Holly, this was crazy talk. Love you, dear.
That made perfect sense. Thank you, Holly. Hey, I want to just, we want to conclude this whole thing. You know, one of the things we've realized and lamented sometimes is we'll put in all this effort into these sermons. We get all excited about it. It stirs up all these good things in the church. And then we just jump right to the next thing. And so every once in a while, we're going to pause like this sermon today to just celebrate. I got to say, as a pastor, I love hearing these stories and how they're impacting and affecting your life, how God's moving through these messages into your everyday coming and going life and doing just beautiful things. And so I want to conclude this time. We want to conclude this time by just asking you a question. What are you going to take from this sermon series? What are you taking with you from Start Close In? Maybe it's a phrase from the poem, which we'll go back to one more time here in just a moment. Maybe it's one of the stories. Maybe it's a phrase that came out of a sermon, or maybe it's an interaction that you had that you wouldn't have otherwise had you not been thinking this way through the conversation that we've been sharing. And so whatever it is, don't just let this be something that fades into the past. Pick something to keep walking with God with moving forward. And if you haven't already told us what that is, we love to hear it. We love to brag about this stuff. We love to talk about it. It fills our heart, and it gives this contagious energy as you hear about other people just doing great things in your faith. It inspires you. It inspires me to lean into God afresh as well. So before we conclude, I want to say this. This is a new format for us, and we were excited to try it. It also took an army of volunteers behind the scenes. Special thank you to Ashley. Special thank you to Danny. Special thank you to the women in my family who are helping run some of these cameras. Thank you, sweethearts. Love you guys. And also to our sound engineer, David. All this stuff, it took, some miracle level things to pull this off, and they did it beautifully. And so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Here's the deal. I'll let you know a little secret about being a pastor is, like the Bible says, there is nothing new under the sun. When we're talking and we're sharing these things, really what we're doing is we're just trying to find a new way to say it that sticks with you, that helps you to see it in your life, your 21st century life as you're living right now and as you're interacting. And so we come up with things like Start Close In, something that hopefully just sticks and has some staying power with you. But we didn't make this stuff up. In fact, one of the things, I'll give one of the last words in this series to Jesus, as he was doing the greatest sermon ever. He had this whole exposition that he did about how worried we get about things, and we get concerned about those second and third steps, and we're agonizing over them, and they take us away from just being with him in the moment. And so here's Jesus's version of Start Close In. He just said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things, all that stuff that you're worried about, that you're concerned about, God knows you need it. These will be given to you as well. Therefore, don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Let's go back to the poem one more time and receive this as a gift, as an invitation from God to walk with him closely, to invite him close in your life, to allow others close in, to pray with him, to communicate with him. May it be a blessing to you. Let's receive this gift together.
Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing, close in, the step you don't want to take.
Start with the ground you know, the pale ground beneath your feet, your own way of starting the conversation.
Start with your own question. Give up on other people's questions. Don't let them smother something simple.
To find another's voice, follow your own voice. Wait until that voice becomes a private ear listening to another.
Start right now. Take a small step that you can call your own. Don't follow someone else's heroics. Be humble and focused. Start close in. Don't mistake that other for your own.
Start close in. Don't take the second step or the third. Start with the first thing. Start with the first thing close in, the step that you don't want to take. Well, church, it's been an absolute delight to get to share this with you on behalf of us, the preaching team, the rest of the staff, the elders. Thanks for the gift of helping to fund, cheer on this conversation so we can present this gift to you and to the world. It's a delight. I'm excited to see where God takes us next. Don't forget to tune in next week. We're going to talk about some future vision stuff and restarting those wonderful in-person services. That's going to be a great conversation. But for this week, God bless you, and goodbye.